everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask Digit. As you know, this is the show where we take all your queries and try to answer the most relevant ones to all of you out there. So, in this episode, I am joined with Mithun and Anirudh from the Digit Test team, and we'll be taking a few questions. The first one is from Mithun.
So this is from Nirav H. Joshi from Bangalore. He has pretty huge configuration list over here, which should be popping up here anytime soon.
Yeah, it is pretty big.
Basically, he wants a high-end system, and he has come up with a few suggestions for components. But he also wants to know whether he can get these particular components for a good price. We've gone through the configurations, and what we noticed is that for a high-end configuration, this particular list is lacking two things. One, the SSD. If you want a pretty fast performing system, as in you want the applications to load pretty fast and you want to switch between applications faster, in that case you need an SSD.
Nothing beats an SSD.
Yeah. So you don't need to go for a RAID system or anything. An SSD at 120 gig should be coming in for like 6 to 7,000 rupees. And apart from that, the graphic card that you mentioned, the GT610, it's a pretty low end configuration. So since you haven't given extra details, we don't know if you just want a video output or do you want good graphics performance. If you just want a video output, the 610 is more than enough. But if you want, let's say, good gaming capabilities, then you could start with any card from the GTX 650 and go further up, as in the GTX 650 Ti, the GTX 660, the 660 Ti, and so on. These,
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
You seriously didn't consider an AMD?
No, I didn't. As for AMD, you can go for the R9 270, the R9 280, 280X, and if you're willing to spend close to 30,000 rupees, the 290 and the 290X. Let's say, apart from that, the SSDs, yes, we haven't mentioned options for the SSDs. The Samsung 840 Pro, or the Corsair Neutron GTX, or the Seagate 600, all of them are really good. They more or less feature the same controller, so they perform at the same level.
Isn't the Samsung 840 Pro the best performing SSD we've tested last year?
Yes, it is pretty much the best we've had so far, and
if you can afford it, it's the SSD that you need to go for.
Yeah, a 120 GB capacity should be more than enough for most people, but if you want more space, then the 240 should be available for around 10 to 11,000 rupees.
What about SSHDs and hybrids?
SSHDs and hybrid drives are somewhere between SSDs and hard drives. They have up to 8 to 10 GB of cache memory. They have 8 GB of cache memory on the drive itself. So what it does is it stores data that is going to be transferred onto the cache before moving it onto the spindle. So it does give you a performance increment, but not to the extent that an SSD would. Finally, you mentioned fans, but you haven't picked out the brand that you'd like. So we have a few recommendations. There's the Noctua NF series, or the Corsair Airflow series, the AF, and finally the Cooler Master Extra Flow series. These fans could conflict with the ones that are bundled with your cabinet. So I suggest that you replace the output fans or all the bundled fans on your computer or your cabinet with these as well.
Are they pretty easy to remove and put together?
Some of these fans do have rubber grommets and specialized screws, so that's nothing much difficult to put together. You always have a quick setup guide with the package.
Because they need to know what size of fan is the cabinet supports, right?
Yeah, and as far as the 300R is concerned, 120mm fan is more than enough for even a high-end configuration. So that's it for this question. We'll have Jayesh with the next one.
Right, so this is a query from Pankaj Kumar. He's left it on our Facebook page, and what he basically wants to know is he has a budget of 30,000 rupees. He wants a laptop either from Dell or Sony with minimum 4 GB of RAM, a 500 GB hard drive, and he has expectations of getting a 2 to 4 GB GPU built in. Now, Pankaj, you're really kind of building castles in the air, because at that kind of price point, you will be really hard pressed to find a laptop with the latest hardware built in.
Yeah.
So we've still gone ahead, tried to find the best deals possible at your price point, and the one that we found is a Dell Inspiron 153521 laptop. It has two SKUs. One fits into your price bracket absolutely perfectly. It has a third generation Core i3 processor, 4 GB RAM, 500 GB hard drive. Doesn't come with Windows 8 or Windows 7. It has Linux as the OS, and one configuration which is at 29,000. It comes with Intel HD 4000 graphics. It doesn't have any discrete GPU. There is another configuration which has all, the CPU is the same, the RAM is the same, has Linux, but it has an AMD Radeon HD 7670M 1 GB GPU. Now, between the two, you will see slightly better performance from the AMD Radeon GPU because it's good at gaming. So we don't know whether you wanted this 30,000 rupee laptop for gaming purposes, but the AMD SKU will satisfy your mid to low level gaming needs just about perfectly. And for a Sony machine, we couldn't find anything at your budget, unfortunately. Though there is one laptop priced at 37,000 rupees, which comes with a Core i3 3120M processor, 4 GB RAM, Windows 8 built-in, and an AMD Radeon HD 7650M graphics. It might be a little difficult to get this laptop even at e-commerce websites, but don't lose hope. Go and try and check this laptop out in Sony retail stores, and I'm sure if you ask hard enough, they should try to pull out the stock from inventories lying around. So,
But one thing, I mean, Mithun, you're the GPU guy, right?
Yeah.
What is it, 2 to 4 GB? I mean, I think it's a myth, isn't it? I mean, why do you need that much memory?
Yeah.
For a graphics card.
Very few games actually utilize that kind of memory. So you should be more than sufficient with a 1 GB card. You don't need to go by configurations by looking at the memory. Instead, you should focus on the SKU number like the 7670 or the 7650. We know the 7670 might be slightly better than
better than the
7650. So that's the point that you should keep in mind instead of the memory. The memory does help, but anything around 1 GB is more than sufficient.
That's a good point, Mithun. Thanks for clearing that out. And the next question is for both Mithun and Regidi, so take it away, folks.
So this is from Tejas Singh, and it's a multi-part query.
Again, a long query.
A really long one. So Tejas basically wants to know, how can you determine the power of a GPU just by looking at the name and the specs and not the benchmarks? Well, the nomenclature between AMD and NVIDIA has changed a bit in recent years, but
It's very confusing, actually.
it's very confusing. But overall, the logic behind them are pretty much the same. You have a prefix that would be GTX, GS, or GT. The best one would be GTX. After that, you now have a 3-digit number in the case of AMD as well as NVIDIA. For NVIDIA, let's say the first number indicates the series. The second number and the second and third number combined indicates the position of the SKU in terms of performance in that particular series. So 650 is comparatively lesser performing so 650 performs lesser than a 660, and 660 performs lesser than a 670, and so on. Finally, we have the 690, which traditionally, or anything with a 90 at the end, which traditionally is a dual GPU SKU. Tejas Singh writes to us on Agent 001. His is a multi-part query, so it's a pretty huge one. So we'll move directly to the questions. The first is where he asked, how can you determine the power of a GPU just by looking at its name and its specs and not the benchmarks? I'm guessing that you want to know which card is better across different generations, as in you're trying to compare a 560 to, let's say, a 640. Well, it's pretty difficult to say off the top of your head because some of the 6 series cards are actually rebadged 5 series cards. So the 560 might be similar to a 640 unless and until you use a software like GPU-Z to figure out the die, you figure out the number of CUDA cores it has, the TPUs and the ROPs, you won't be able to tell which card is which. So just by looking at the numbers, it's difficult. But if you're thinking of, let's say, comparing cards in the same series, let's say 650 versus a 660 in the case of NVIDIA, then the number, the second and the third number indicates the position of the SKU in that particular series. So 660 is better than a 650. As for AMD, it recently went, let's say, it's a new nomenclature system. Earlier it had a 4-digit system, now it has a 3-digit system, which is similar to NVIDIA. So AMD goes by 2 prefixes currently, the R7 and the R9. Lower end cards will be coming with the R4.
So, 3, right?
Yeah. So let's say in case of AMD, we have the 200 series going on right now. So the 280, the 280X, the 290 in that series. So the 280X being, let's say, having an X at the end is better than the 280. And the 290 is naturally better than the 280 as well as the 280X. Now comes the question of dual GPUs. In AMD as well as NVIDIA, we've had dual GPU SKUs before. Right now, we don't have one in AMD's new series, but NVIDIA's series, we could see a 790 coming up. But let's say in the case of AMD, we had the 6990 and the 7990 in the previous generations. But for the current generation, we don't know what to expect. The second part of the first query, he asked, are company modified cards better than stock ones? Well, it's generally better. Company modified cards feature better cooling, higher factory overclock, they have custom PCBs and better VRM circuitry. So they are like, even if they have a better factory overclock, you have a VRM circuit to complement the extra power needed.
And is there a quick way to find out how these cards are named differently than stock cards?
Yes, the as in these company modified cards would have some moniker like Zotac goes with the AMP edition, Asus goes with the Mars edition, Matrix edition, and
OC?
OC versions, yes, and MSI has the Twin Frozer. So these names are all, let's say, they're mostly, these words are marketing gimmicks.
Monikers.
Yeah. These words are marketing monikers, but they do have some benefit, and you should read reviews like the ones we have on the website to know more about these modified versions. The third part of his query is that he has an old GeForce 8400 GS, sorry, and he has overclocked and he has overclocked it by 200 megahertz, both the memory and the GPU, but he saw no difference in the performance. You see, if you overclocked your card, you need to check the same performance using a benchmark of that era. The 8400 GS is a really old card, and the current generation benchmarks has scaled up to a level so that current, let's say the 780, 780 Ti's and all are benchmarked. So older generation cards which perform comparatively lower, the difference between them is not visible in current generation benchmarks. But if you pick a benchmark that's 6 years old, you'll be able to tell the difference.
No, but even then, I mean, say you're getting 20 FPS in crisis. Say you overclock it by 10%, you get what, 2 FPS more?
Yeah, more or less, but
you know what is the difference, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. But he hasn't mentioned which benchmarks he has used, so we can't go into the details of that. The second query is he wants to know which processors are better. He's seen comparisons where it's mentioned that AMD has 8 cores, Intel has 6 cores, yet the Intel processor is better. How do we figure these things out? Well, processors across different manufacturers, they come up with different instruction sets to get the same thing done. So let's say you have a software SDK which you use to program your software. That SDK will have a certain binary to run on AMD processors and a modified binary to run on Intel processors. Now the implementation of these two instruction sets is slightly different. That is where the performance difference comes in. Also, the transistors which are patented by their respective manufacturers, they perform slightly different. So it's a combination of instruction sets, the hardware, and a lot more factors. So overall, we just stick to benchmarks to figure out which processor is better. The last query he asks about cameras, and I guess Anirudh is best suited to answer this one.
Yeah, okay. So the third part of the question is about cameras.
Yeah.
So what he wants to know is that as like everybody, even we've said it many times, that megapixels don't matter. So he wants to know what are the main factors that would determine a good camera. So for that, I would say one of the biggest factors is your sensor type, which is whether you have a CCD or CMOS sensor. And even CMOS sensors, you need, like SLRs have calibrated CMOS sensors, webcams have very cheap uncalibrated CMOS sensors, which is why webcams look bad. So ideally you need a CMOS sensor, and you have these backside illuminated sensors, they're called. Those will bring in more light. And why I'm talking about light is because lighting is one of the most important factors that determines the quality of your image. So it's like noise can make or break an image, and if your sensor is sensitive to light, like a lot of light, then yeah, you'll get a good image, which will look nice even in low light. And other than that, I think another very big factor is your lens quality. Like your stock lenses are good, but even a simple prime lens like a 50 mm from Canon that costs barely like I think what 5,000 is way better than any of your 18-50 mm lenses. Other than that, I think like it's a good photographer will always manage to take a good photograph no matter what his camera is. I mean, you should know and understand the limitations of your camera. It's like a driver driving a car, right? I mean, a good driver will know how to overcome the
Drive a bad
limitations.
car, yeah.
I mean, you put Schumacher in a Mercedes, he'll still do well.
That's true.
Yeah.
Nice analogy.
So the thing is, uh, understand what sensor you have in your camera. Make sure you have a good lens, and obviously just learn how to take proper photos, and you'll do fine. Megapixels will only matter up to about like 6 megapixels. After that, doesn't matter really. And I think the last query is about laptops. So I think Jayesh will take that.
Thanks, Anirudh. The last question comes from Dinesh Gautam, and this was posted on our Facebook page. And the question is very short and sweet. It says, suggest a laptop in the range of rupees 35,000 to 45,000. And that's it. It's a very strange and short question. Now, we honestly don't know what to say to Dinesh because there's very little information that he's provided. We don't know what he'll be using this laptop for primarily and whether he has any brand preferences. So, what we would recommend Dinesh you do is do some research either on our website, go through the reviews that we do, or go on e-commerce sites and try to see a little, laptops that catch your fancy, or go to, LFRs like Chroma and Reliance Digital. Do some initial research on your own. Zero in on 3 or 4 laptop samples. Or if you're completely you don't know what you want to buy, then just give us more information. What you'll be using this laptop for, and we'll help you out. Right, that's it for this show. Keep sending those questions in. We love answering them, and you could either send one on our Facebook page, on our Twitter ID, or at the agent email address. And from Mithun, Anirudh, and me, Jayesh here, it's bye bye for now. Thanks.